Well, here we are again after a little interval, and this will go out, I guess, at the end of July 28th, somewhere around there. And we've got a new Labour government in Britain. It's interesting, isn't it, what has happened? I wonder what's going to happen to America. But we've been trying in our own way to, well, Americans use the word lobby differently, but to kind of shout for our corner for the Middle East and for a better peace process in the Middle East. And we have therefore put together a paper for the incoming Labour government. And it was only submitted after the King's speech, so literally it's only just been submitted. King's speech is a speech in which the government of the day sets out its policies, rather like the State of the Union address in America. So we've done that. We've set out our recommendations to the Labour government after they had done their King's speech, which happened pretty swiftly. And we're quite pleased with them, I guess. They went to the Right Honourable Mr. David Lammy MP, who's now the Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Affairs of the United Kingdom, so our Foreign Minister, to Sir William Patey, who is the chair of the Labour Middle East Council, and an old friend of ours, actually, here at the Next Century Foundation. We know him well. He's a crotchety old Scottish Arabist. He's a good thinker, got a good brain, good man, actually. And to Mr. Hamish Falconer, the newly appointed Parliamentary Under Secretary of State at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, a young aristo who stood for Labour. Seems like a good guy. We don't know him. Brand new to Parliament. So what did we suggest? Well, it's interesting time, isn't it? And that's the great Chinese curse, to live in interesting times. We asked for a number of things, actually. We asked for the government to commit to the early recognition of a Palestinian state. We asked for the appointment of a special envoy for reconciliation in the Middle East. We asked that UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Works Agency funding be restored. And we asked that Britain stand ready to give peacekeeping troops to Gaza if asked, and to announce that commitment. We also asked that Britain promote a Madrid II multilateral conference to be hosted by the Arab states and encourage immediate presidential elections for Palestine. So that was our kind of wish list. And we say, we're embarking on a new chapter in our nation's leadership. With the new foreign secretary, new foreign minister. One of his first acts was to visit Israel and Palestine within days of the election result. Well, visit Israel anyway. Don't know how far he got into Palestine. But it matters that the new government should have a clear, active position on this complex Israel-Palestine war, and a substantial proportion of the British public, including traditional Labour voters, care deeply about the issue because of their commitment to peace and human rights, which compels right-thinking Britons to take a proactive stance. We need clarity from the new government because we all believe in promoting peaceful coexistence. So let me restate the things we decided to recommend. We said recognition for Palestine. We said appoint a special envoy. We said support and convene grassroots dialogue. We said revive the anti-incitement committee. We said a broader security strategy in the strategic defense review. We said to restrict weapons exports, restart the former level of UNRWA funding support, and proactively support the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002, to support a new Madrid conference, to plan post-conflict reconstruction, and stand with democracy. A hell of a mouthful of stuff. But the war raging in the Middle East has cost the Labour government dear. We got disappointment in many constituencies over the lack of really strong calls for a ceasefire. That's translated into anger and was reflected in the loss of 5 parliamentary posts to candidates with an end-to-war agenda. 5 traditional Labour seats fell to candidates with an end-the-war agenda. One of them was to Jeremy Corbyn, of course, but another 4 as well. Yeah, there are a lot of expressions of frustration among Muslim communities. A clear approach is essential. The United Kingdom has a historic responsibility. The Balfour Declaration was incorporated in the League of Nations mandate founding document. And you know, Palestine was a British protectorate for years. And the Arab people were made promises after World War I. The UK authored UN Security Council Resolution 242, which is the absolute seal on a two-state solution as far as the world is concerned. And Premier Netanyahu may get his supporters in Knesset to vote against ever recognizing a Palestinian state. But, I mean, who cares about international law? It is the position in international law because of UN Security Council Resolution 242, that the position of the world, the absolute commitment of the world, is that there will be a two-state solution. Now, the United States, in theory, is the country with the most influence over the broader conflict, but it's in a mess, isn't it? Theoretically, Biden can man up now that he's no longer encumbered with the need to be a lame duck president between now and January, because he is not burdened with the problem of the election campaign, since he's no longer standing for election. So in theory, the US president could actually step up to the line during this time and do things. In fact, he's freer than at any time previously because he does not have to stand for re-election. But will he? Will he have the energy or the will to do anything? If not, it falls to minor players like the United Kingdom and other key players in the region like Jordan, Egypt, and the Gulf states to do something. And it's not necessary to take sides with Israel or the Palestinian people. There's a third way that encourages cooperation towards a peaceful and beneficial solution for both parties and indeed every party involved. So let's just talk through these things. And the first thing we advocated is that the UK should recognize a Palestinian state. Well, Sweden, Spain, Norway, Slovenia, and Ireland have all done so, if you're talking about European states. I was impressed by the government's assertion in the King's speech. You know, King Charles reads the speech, but it's the speech of the government, the incoming government. And the assertion was that it is committed to a two-state solution with a safe and secure Israel alongside a viable and sovereign Palestinian state. The House of Commons itself, British Parliament, has already voted in favour of recognition. The government is the slackers. UK is still an internationally significant player. It's a member of the Security Council of the United Nations, and recognition of a Palestinian state by the United Kingdom would be controversial, but it's an opportunity for British leadership. Alternatively, if the British Foreign Office and the British government and Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, are wary about Palestinian recognition straight out now, they could pluck it like a cherry out of the pie. If immediate recognition of a Palestinian state is a step too far, the UK could commit in advance to the recognition of Palestine as a state, concurrent with the recognition of Israel as a state by one of the lead Gulf Cooperation Council nations, the GCC nations. Well, of course, Bahrain has already recognized Israel, and indeed the United Arab Emirates have already recognized Israel. But what about if a nation like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia or the Sultanate of Oman were to have a discussion during the context of a state visit, either by the British Foreign Secretary to Oman or the Sultan of Oman to the UK, and were to come out jointly with a statement that they would both recognize together. So Israel gets something because it gets recognition from a major GCC nation, and Palestine gets something, so it gets recognition from Britain. A kind of quid pro quo. This would make Britain a game changer. And I am certain that Saudi Arabia, or at least the Sultanate of Oman, a country I know well, could be persuaded, and their Anglophiles in the Sultanate of Oman could be persuaded to go along with that kind of strategy. Ultimately, I think it's in Israel's interests to recognize a future Palestinian state itself. And if a critical mass of countries around the world recognize Palestine, it will strengthen the hand of those in Israel who still understand that a two-state solution is in their best interests. Now, the second thing we recommended was a special envoy. The Israel-Palestine conflict is so complex. It's a complex matter for the British government to thread their way through the difficulties to make the best contribution to a peace process. Now, we've recommended things of this kind before. Ambassador Wolf was appointed by the USA, in part at the suggestion of John Morose, the late head of the East-West Institute, who picked it up as an idea to run with, in discussion with us, actually. And he was very effective in many small ways. Britain could appoint a special envoy for the Middle East peace process to coordinate the actions of the government. I mean, the present crisis presents an opportunity for action. We need a third way. We need peace rather than the kind of alternative that's being offered by Israel and Palestine, which is just to go knock the stuffing out of each other for all time to come. We have the US, I suppose, as an interlocutor, but it's rather weak. We have the Egypt-Qatar track of the peace process, not necessarily greatly effective. But if we had a special envoy, then he or she could stress that it's in the best interests of the state of Israel and the Palestinians to proceed to negotiations, rather than seeing two competing one-state visions that are bound to end in tears. We have experience in the Good Friday Agreement. We know what it's like, striving for peace, and we could help. Another thing we believe is that we should support and convene grassroots dialogue. I mean, Lord Stone has offered to do some of that in the House of Lords, but the British government should do that, bringing grassroots organisations, what they call civil society, together to help rebuild empathy and trust and a shared desire for peace. I mean, that's part of the recipe for the Good Friday Agreement that led to peace in Ireland. And it could be part of the UK's role to facilitate conversation between grassroots social groups representing different perspectives on the Middle East peace process. Israeli and Palestinian peace activists, with the possibility of activists from other Arab states participating. That kind of conversation could include a structured series of workshops hosted by the Foreign Office, leading to an agreed vision. We need to do something. We aren't doing enough. The next thing we wanted to see was the Anti-Incitement Committee revived. I mentioned Ambassador John Wolf earlier. He set up the trilateral US-Israel-Palestine Anti-Incitement Committee. And George Bush discussed plans to reinvigorate and reactivate this Anti-Incitement Committee back in 2003, but it did not happen. Now might be the moment to restart it. It did good work. What was it doing? It was dealing with examples of the demonization of the Jewish people in the state of Israel in Palestinian school textbooks, or the demonization of Palestinians by Israelis in the media, which Israeli media has not reported the Gaza War. Oh, it reports it from a very limited perspective. It reports what's going on with the deaths of Israel's soldiers or the hostages. But what it does not do is show Israelis the devastation that the bombing has caused. And Palestinians are also concerned by the fact that Israel's textbooks do not record the internationally recognized green line between Israel and the West Bank, implying that the entire area belongs to the state of Israel. So the Incitement Committee did good work, and there is a lot of incitement. Last time it was in action, it made a huge difference, and it was closed down by Netanyahu, actually, years ago, because Netanyahu's been on the scene a while, so we need it. The next thing we asked for was a broader security commitment in the Strategic Defence Review. I mean, the King's Speech had a commitment to Britain playing its part in trying to secure long-term peace and security in the Middle East. We have a Strategic Defence Review coming up, but it should be a security review as well, because one of the key issues is whether, for example, Britain is able to commit peacekeeping forces to Gaza in the aftermath of this current war. I mean, UN forces are likely to be an anathema to Israel. Israel's not likely to agree to United Nations troops. But the United Arab Emirates has offered to be part of a peacekeeping force on certain conditions, but nonetheless, it has. Britain should step up to the mark and join them. It might make a difference. If we did. America's not going to do it. No way. So it's down to somebody like us. The other thing, restricting and reducing weapons exports to Israel, well, they're already down because our existing criteria for weapons exports have not been met in recent months. But the UK could actually acknowledge that the reduced level of weapons exports to Israel is a response to human rights concerns. It would be good, I think. I mean, obviously, we don't want to endorse the uncurbed influx of ammunition and weaponry to Gaza either, through the tunnels or whatever, and that needs to be made clear. The next thing we asked for was restoring the former level of UNRWA support, and I can report with great glee and happiness that the British government have taken this on board and done it. It was so essential. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency is the main deliverer of aid to Gaza, and Britain is now resuming the former level of support. I mean, why was it withheld? Because of accusations that UNRWA employees, UN employees, had been fighting with Hamas. May be true. But we cannot afford to stop supporting UNRWA. And we have restarted. And that is good. At least something is being done by the new British government. We also suggested building on the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002. I mean, that doesn't mean subscribing to the Arab Peace Initiative as an endgame, because the Arab Peace Initiative basically called for Israel's withdrawal from all of the occupied territories, but that's not an option. But it's a basis for peace and normal relations with Israel that is accepted by the entire Arab and Muslim world on the basis that there will be the establishment of a Palestinian state alongside the state of Israel. The government of Saudi Arabia, well, they would back it because it's based on the proposals put forward by Crown Prince Abdullah way back. Yeah, they back it. They say, the Saudi Arabia says that the Arab Peace Initiative should be considered a pathway to peace. Well, the British government could view it in the same way and encourage everybody to adopt this pathway to peace. Then you have to have mutually agreed upon minimal land swaps. You have to have an agreed upon resolution of the refugee problem. As far as the refugee problem is concerned, the superb Geneva Initiative makes it clear as to what would be the simplest answer, which is that Palestinians have a right of returning to the Palestinian state. That means there's no true justice because they can't get their homes back in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, but they can get compensation. We also suggested supporting a new Madrid conference. I mean, the first Madrid conference in 1999 was a multilateral peace conference hosted by Spain and co-sponsored by the US and the Soviet Union. Of course, you can't have the Soviets co-sponsoring anything now, but a new conference need not replace bilateral negotiations, but would signify a new era, and Britain could encourage the 6 GCC states, to Gulf Cooperation Council states, the oil-producing nations, to host this, because it presents an opportunity And it's a value because Israel could possibly be more easily persuaded to engage in such a conference than bilateral discussions on their own, because the potential reward for Israel, greater rapprochement with the GCC, is more valuable. Then there's a question of post-conflict reconstruction. And I think the UK should use its soft power in that regard, or we think so. We should step up our funding. It's necessary. Funding is limited. The funding available internationally is limited, but the Gaza peace process issue is seminal. It's a major one where we have to do something. And also we should stand by democracy. We need presidential elections in Palestine, and we should push for them. The Palestinian Authority is a busted flush. It's dead in the water. So we need to encourage democratic institutions, help train lawyers, judges, law enforcement, help convert Palestine into an established democratic state. It's necessary to have a functioning government for a Palestinian state. It does not have one now. The old dinosaurs that have been there for years need to be pushed aside. If we had a sovereign Palestine in charge of its own rule of law, we would have something. Well, bless you all. Those are my thoughts overall, but not just my thoughts, the thoughts of the Next Century Foundation's working group on the Middle East peace process with regard to what the British government should do. Reactions, please, if you get the time. Bless your heart. Thank you for listening.